Happy April Fool's Day. The purpose of today is not to be fooled and to treat yourself with a big dose of reality. The problem is that one of the greatest scams going around at the moment, at least in the scientific world, is the idea of a grand solar minimum. And there's been so many errors made in these predictions by the proponents of a grand solar minimum that I wonder why anybody still believes in it. Let me explain why. There seems to be desperation setting in those proponents of the grand solar minimum. More and more videos are claiming that we are in the grand solar minimum already, but the one thing they all have in common is there's no scientific evidence. We're getting more and more interviews by Zarkova touting the grand solar minimum and an imminent new little ice age. Again, no scientific evidence, except for in one case she claims that it snowed somewhere at some time. That's not evidence. Why doesn't anybody ask her why all her predictions have turned out to be wrong so far? And how many more times will her predictions turn out to be wrong before people stop believing in this nonsense? Here are some examples. In her 2015 paper, even her hindcasts were wrong. A hindcast is when you try to reproduce the data of the past. She shows a picture of her figure 2 in the 2015 paper showing solar cycles 21, 22 and 23. The reddish curve at the background here is the actual data and the black line is her model. Now for solar cycle 22 and solar cycle 23 we have the dates of maximum, and this was known by the time she wrote her paper. In solar cycle 22 the maximum was in November of 1989, and in solar cycle 23 it was in November of 2001. But her model doesn't predict that. It gets those numbers completely wrong. She predicted that the maximum for 22 would be in January of 1991 and the peak of solar cycle 23 would be in August of 1999. In both cases she was wrong by a couple of years. That should ring some alarm bells if you're trying to do a model. If the model doesn't predict what happened in the past, then your model isn't probably very good. You should throw it away and start again. Let's take a look at some of the predictions that she got wrong that she should have got right. First one is an easy one. It's the prediction for the solar minimum activity between solar cycles 23 and solar cycle 24. She predicts quite a high level of activity, much higher than most minima that we've seen in the past. However, it turned out to be the longest and quietest solar minimum for over 100 years. So she was definitively wrong there. Another prediction that didn't go quite so well, she said that solar cycle 23 would be about the same size as solar cycle 24, shown here with this red line. But actually she's completely wrong here, because the peak of solar cycle 24 turned out to be 64% of solar cycle 23, much lower. And again, the paper was written after these events had occurred, so she should have got this right. She also predicted the date of the maximum of solar cycle 24 and got that wrong as well. Her prediction was for January 2011, a remarkably short peak time. However, the actual peak turned out to be in April of 2014, and only a very few people actually got this right. Unfortunately, I was one of them. Now we'll get into real predictions where the prediction was actually after the paper was written. She predicted that solar cycle 25 would be less than solar cycle 24. But it turns out that it's actually much greater than. It's 37% larger than solar cycle 24 already, and it hasn't finished the cycle as yet, so we don't know what the final total will be. It'll be a minimum of 37% larger. So she's wrong again. What about the date of solar cycle 25 maximum? Well, she's wrong again. She predicted that it would be in March of 2022, and we're so far along with the smooth sunspot number to September of 2024, and it's still going up. So she's at least 2 years out there, and probably much more, as I think it'll carry on going up for at least another few months. Then there are other mistakes that she makes, like putting historical dates on her plot of her model, which is supposed to support the fact that the model is right. But the problem is these dates that I've got marked here with the red squares are all wrong. The medieval warm period was about 150 years earlier than she shows, in a dip in her graph, not a peak. The little ice age actually started during a peak of one of her graphs and went on into the peak in the mid-1800s. She's got the dates of both the Maunder minimum and the Doppler minimum wrong. She points out that the modern maxima all have double peaks. If you look at the old sunspot cycles, most of them have double or triple peaks, so this is not really a major discovery. Solar cycle 25 will be the end of the modern maximum, but it looks as though it's the beginning of the next maximum, so that's wrong too. So all in all, her predictions and her associations with climate are completely wrong. There's just no easy way of putting it, that she's just been wrong, 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 and wrong. She then, in a later paper, extrapolated into the past. She used a 400-year cycle for the grand solar minimum. And I've marked on the plot here 400-year cycles with these vertical bars. I lined the first one up with the Maunder minimum, giving her that one. Now look how many of those bars correspond to the blue dips in the curve, which are the grand solar minima according to this. And very few of them do that. And in fact, most of them miss quite comprehensively. So all in all, again, this extrapolation of the 400-year model is wrong. Another thing that undermines her overall credibility, her 2019 paper had to be withdrawn from the journal. It was wrong because of fundamental scientific errors in her assumptions, something that I think a undergraduate physics major wouldn't have made. But she made them, and the paper was shown to be wrong and had to be withdrawn from a journal. That's the ultimate insult to a scientist. So let's draw some conclusions. Remember, the Zarkova 2015 paper started this whole grand solar minimum thing. And just about every prediction that she has put out has been proven to be wrong. Why aren't the interviewers asking her about this? They're ignoring errors in her program. And how many times is she wrong before people stop believing this nonsense about the grand solar minimum? You can't believe anything about 2026 or possible new little ice ages or anything, because everything she said so far has been wrong. So folks that still believe in the grand solar minimum are not April Fools, they're all year round fools. And I would hope that they learn fairly quickly that they're been duped by a bunch of people that just like conspiracy theories and things of that sort. Once again, thank you for listening. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.